Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
Positronic hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the season 2 premiere of Daredevil Born Again. The episode was called The Northern Star. And as it starts, we're treated to the latest episode of the BB Report, which of course is the sort of man-on-the-street interview web news program done by the relative of the reporter that Matt had worked with in the Netflix show, who was, of course, killed by Kingpin. But now the citizens seem to be praising Mayor Fisk instead of being critical of him, which is suspicious. Then we're thrown right back into the action as we catch up with Daredevil on his latest mission, infiltrating the Northern Star, a cargo ship passing through the Fisk-owned and Fisk-operated Freeport, which Daredevil discovers is smuggling military-grade weapons for, well, of course, the said same king of crime, Kingpin. He's not exactly subtle with his approach either, beating down a handful of thugs in brutal fashion, and because of that, it doesn't take long for his presence to be detected. His actions put the ship's captain and first mate on high alert, and they're forced to engage Fisk's contingency plan that he laid out in case something should go wrong while they're trying to get to the port, something like getting caught by the authorities, or in this case, Daredevil. And so they decide to sink the ship and leave no survivors, while, of course, themselves quickly abandoning ship. But, of course, Daredevil, aka Matt, hears them put their plan in motion and, acting quickly, leaves a ticking watch from one of the people that he's knocked out or whatever in one of the shipping containers with the contraband so that he can track the guns later. He then goes down with the ship, and we see him after that resurface on the shore, at which point he regroups and listens as the ship goes down. And this occurrence, of course, is a massive spectacle and something that Fisk won't be able to cover up. After the credits, Daredevil returns to his secret hideout where he's been staying with Karen Page, who's been sharpening her combat skills. He explains to her how he was just successful in his mission, and the two of them together wonder who Fisk's client could be. But they decide to take that mystery on later, knowing that it's a big blow to Fisk's operation, and that it will slow down at least future shipments through the port because the ship is kind of in the way and blocking things from getting through. So it'll block these shipments for a while. But before we cut away from this wonderful duo, they share a kiss, which I guess is to signal the audience that they are in fact a romantic couple, which I guess they kind of were on the original Netflix series but never really got there. Well, they are now. Kingpin then arrives on the scene and watches the Northern Star slowly sink from afar. He's visibly upset and wastes no time declaring it a terrorist attack orchestrated by the vigilante of Hell's Kitchen, of course, Daredevil, and he declares war on him and tells his team, consisting of Sheila Rivera, Daniel Blake, and Officer Powell, to start hunting him down immediately. He then takes Buck Cashman aside and asks for actual intel on the shipwreck, and Buck informs him that only the captain and first mate survived, so Fisk tells him to find them immediately. We're then taken to a bar in Washington, D.C., where a man named Mr. Charles is watching news coverage of the shipwreck, while he's on the phone with someone whom he tells that he'll take care of the mess himself. Back at Matt and Karen's hideout, the pair discuss Fisk's current mental state, and both agree that Fisk is losing his mind. Karen suggests it may be time to consider alternative means of taking him down, since nothing they've done thus far has worked long-term, but Matt is insistent that exposing Fisk to the public for who he truly is still their best course of action. Karen then gets a lead on the whereabouts of the captain and first mate, and heads out to track them down. In the mayor's office, Kingpin watches footage of Daredevil breaking into the ship, and slams his laptop closed. The lieutenant governor and attorney general drop by his office and begin to question the mayor's recent actions, his emergency powers, and declaring vigilantes as terrorists. They're laying into him because none of his moves were sanctioned by the office of the attorney general or the governor's office. Fix retorts that he's been a man of his word, and his actions have indeed cleared up the streets. The attorney general promises more oversight, especially with the impending vigilante trials. The tides seem to be shifting against Fisk until Mr. Charles joins the meeting. He's acquainted with Fisk already, and we learn that he's coming from Langley and is apparently working for CIA Director Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. Boy, that is not a name, that is a title. The AG promptly gets a phone call from Miss de Fontaine and suddenly changes his tune towards Fisk. He offers support, and Fisk smugly shows his appreciation. Meanwhile, Karen dons a wig before sneaking into a convenience store to covertly pick up a file that presumably contains information about the captain and first mate. Next, we go to the prison where Jack Dukens, aka the swordsman, is getting an unwanted psychological evaluation from Heather Glenn. She claims she's impartial and that this evaluation will be provided to both the district attorney and to his legal team at Murdoch and McDuffie, but Dukens scoffs, knowing she works for the mayor and that this is all a sham. She writes unfavorable things about him before she starts having visions of Muse, and it looks like maybe she's not in the best place at this point. At the office of Murdoch and McDuffie, Cherry stops by to meet with Kristen McDuffie, and both are frustrated that no one has been able to find where the AVTF, the Anti-Vigilante Task Force, has been taking their prisoners. They haven't heard from Matt either, which worries Kristen, but Cherry assures her that Matt will be fine. Meanwhile, the DA interrupts to talk to McDuffie about the upcoming swordsman trial and suggests that she plead out to save her career. He even hints at the odds being stacked against her and offers her a job in his office, but she refuses. Cherry then heads to a secret location to meet with none other than Matt Murdoch. Matt fills him in on what was aboard the Northern Star and tells him that he needs to expose Fisk before the Kingpin destroys the city. He also doesn't want to bring McDuffie into the fold because he doesn't want to put her at risk. Cherry asks, "What about me? Don't you want to not put me at risk?" But Matt says he's old, so it's okay, which I guess gave them a little bit of a laugh. Officer Powell and the AVTF kickstart their manhunt for the captain and first mate and raid a restaurant owned by a woman named Ariana. She's uncooperative and calls Powell a fascist, which results in the corrupt cop punching her in the face. Then one of the men is spotted in the restaurant, but makes a break for it. He's not quick enough, though, and Powell catches up and brutally beats him down. What appears to be another installment of the BB report airs, but it gets hacked, and we see an individual in an exaggerated Kingpin mask slamming BB for the pivot in her coverage. The masked reporter then airs footage of Daredevil breaking into the ship and exposes Fisk's shipment. The next scene is BB attending a party at Daniel Blake's fancy new apartment. She questions how he was able to afford the place on his deputy mayor's salary, and he says he got a deal because Fisk owns the building. She says that Fisk shouldn't be still involved in his old businesses, but he insists everything is legit because the building is part of a trust that Buck manages. She's clearly not happy about the loophole, but decides not to argue and tells him to be careful. Matt visits Ariana's restaurant and gains her trust. He knows she's been helping people get out of New York and was going to help the captain and first mate before the raid. They know it's probably too late for one of them, but he still has to try and save the other before the AVTF finds him. We then see Powell torturing his captive, who tells Powell that he doesn't know where the other man is, but Powell doesn't stop until Buck walks in. Buck orders everyone to leave and then asks the man what happened on the boat. So he tells him how Daredevil boarded and that he had to sink the ship, which is what Buck and Fisk ordered him to do. Buck knows he's telling the truth and seems to empathize for a moment when the captain offers to go home, but then he promptly executes him. Buck informs Fisk, who's in the middle of a meeting with Vanessa, and Mr. Charles, who is really not happy about the shipwreck since those were his goods. He's not remotely afraid of the Kingpin and tells him what needs to be done. They need to move the shipment across the city without anyone knowing about it, a task that is far easier said than done. Fisk says he has loyal men willing to do the job, but Charles asks if he's ready to kill some of these men once the job is done, at which point Fisk hesitates since it's hard to find good men. Charles offers him his own men to do the job, saying they're expendable. Fisk doesn't want the job to be traced to him, and Charles assured him that it won't be before he finishes his drink. Blake returns to his apartment and is pleased to find it clean. BB arranged for a cleaning service, and he thanks her via text. She receives the text during a secret meeting with her source, Karen Page. BB is working with Karen to expose Fisk. Karen also asks her whether she has feelings for Blake, who she's still using as her unwitting source, but BB says that they're strictly friends. Karen also confirms to BB that Fisk did indeed kill her Uncle Ben. She feels a bit of guilt about that because she's pretty sure Ben was trying to protect her, so she tells BB to be safe. Then, in Heather's apartment, she's reviewing notes when she gets a call from the DA, who asks her to juice up the evaluation a bit. She agrees to make Jack seem more dangerous, and has another vision of Muse as her descent into madness and darkness seems to continue. He tries to ask her out at that point, but she hangs up. Matt and Karen meet back at their hideout and recap the day with a quick training session. Karen's improved her skills, but remains unmatched for Matt. They take a break and reminisce about Nelson, Murdoch, and Page. She asks Matt if he ever misses it, and he admits he does, and she says that she does too. At Ariana's restaurant, she gets word that there's a man eating out of the dumpster. She tells her waiter to prepare a plate, but he tells her that he already did, and now the man wants to thank her personally. She goes outside to meet him, and it's the first mate. For the final scene of the episode, we head to Cherry's apartment where he's reviewing his files. He gets a knock on the door from the AVTF, who want to know why he's been looking for the captain and first mate. He refuses to answer their questions without a warrant, so they break in and start to beat him up. One of the officers brings a gun to his temple, and just when we think it may be over for the good detective, Daredevil intervenes and knocks out the officer, although the second one is able to warn their backup. The other officers arrive, and Daredevil begins to deliver one of his classic ass whoopings until he gets distracted by Cherry having a heart attack, which he can hear. The AVTF manage to subdue and unmask Matt, and are shocked to learn that he's Matt Murdock. Of course, at this point, all hope looks lost when an officer brings a gun to Matt's head, and then suddenly an unseen assassin rapidly kills all four of the officers from a distance. Daredevil and Cherry are both confused until a knife is thrown into the room with expert precision, with a logo and a message reading, "You're welcome," which of course means that it was Bullseye. And that's where the episode ended. So I liked this show on Netflix quite a bit. I don't think it's quite the same show now that it's on Disney Plus. The original show, they really took their time with it. It was like 20 episodes a season, and so you really got great character development and great arcs and just a lot of great storytelling and, some padding, but it was a really great show. This show does have the spirit of that show and the building blocks, and, certainly the cast is still just as talented. The action is off the hook, so it's very good. I liked it last season, and, I liked this episode. Charlie Cox is in crazy form, and Daredevil just looks amazing on screen. And, of course, a lot of the action is stunt work, but just, when he's standing there in the suit, he looks crazy awesome. And like I said, the acting is great on behalf of the cast. Vincent D'Onofrio, of course, remains excellent. So it's just a really good show still. And, that's especially true now for me because Matt and Karen are together. I really like that. I liked them sort of getting together in the original show, and I'm happy that they are together on this show. I think that's awesome. And apparently that all happened off camera between the end of season 1 and season 2. So we don't really know how that happened. Maybe we'll get flashbacks that explain it because they weren't really seeing eye to eye during the first season, if I recall. Things were not gelling between them. So it was kind of interesting, but, I'm really glad for it. It's a little confusing, though, because Matt was dating the psychiatrist lady that he saved from Muse towards the end of season 1. And so my question is, what happened to that? Where did that go? Will we get flashbacks that explain it? We'll have to see. They didn't really show us much, any, of Matt's recovery from his bullet wound. Like, he got shot at the end of season 1. So I guess he recovered from that relatively quickly, which is kind of crazy. So there was no real fallout from that. It was like kind of a dramatic moment at the end of season 1. And you're like, oh my God, Matt's been shot. And then we pick up season 2 and it's all in the past. So, they didn't have to have him like go through the recovery on camera for this season. Maybe they did that because we've seen that before with other injuries that he sustained in the past on the Netflix show, for instance. And so maybe they were like, we can't go to that well again. And that makes sense. But then why have him take a bullet for Kingpin? And, Kingpin in the premiere doesn't talk about how, he's conflicted about going after Matt, because he did kind of seem conflicted towards the end of season 1. And, then Matt took a bullet for him, but it's like that didn't happen. So maybe that's something that's going to come up as the season progresses, but it's just really weird that they left it in this crazy tense place where those two had sort of come to a really tense point in the story. And then one takes a bullet for the other. And then it's like we start season 2 and I guess a bunch of time has gone by and none of that is top of mind for anyone. So I thought that was kind of weird, but maybe they'll get to it. Maybe, they'll bring it up during the season. Meanwhile, the psychiatrist lady is kind of going nuts, I guess based on the trauma she experienced when she was attacked by Muse. So I don't know where that's going, and why do they want to make the swordsman guy look worse than he is? What's the angle there? They're trying to make an example of him, maybe, but we'll have to see. Why is Bullseye helping Matt? What's that about? Is it the whole "the enemy of my enemy is my friend" kind of thing? But I don't know, because is Matt the enemy of Bullseye's enemies, or weren't the people who are Matt's enemies Bullseye's friends? Or Bullseye's friends? So I don't understand what's happening there. Maybe that will also be revealed. The other thing I want to talk about that's very interesting, and I try not to get political on this channel, but sometimes you can't help it because of plot lines and shows that you're covering. And it can't be ignored that and they kind of touched on it last season, there are a lot of parallels between the way Fisk is viewed by the people and the way Donald Trump is viewed by the people in real life, which is he's very polarizing. Some people love him, some people think he's an absolute thug. Same is true for both men. And so Daredevil Born Again season 1 took place during the Biden administration. Trump had been president, but was not president while it was airing. So all the stuff Fisk did during the first season of Daredevil Born Again, creating the task force and all that stuff, couldn't be seen as similar to anything Trump had done. But now in season 2, that Trump is president again and has been doing some really hard cracking down on the immigrant population with ICE and so forth, it's again really hard not to see how what Fisk is doing on the show and what Trump is doing in real life are like the same thing. Cracking down super hard. You know, Fisk says, no due process, no warrants, no this, no that, just crack skulls. And that's Trump's whole thing. But that speech from the show is from the first season when Trump hadn't started doing all this stuff yet. So it's really weird that they started down a path of making Fisk this crazed, authoritarian, brutish, like fascist almost mayor, going after a particular population with an iron fist. And so now they're continuing that in season 2, and it happens to parallel exactly what's happening in real life now that Trump is president. And so that's interesting by itself, but what's really interesting is we clearly know that Fisk is the bad guy on this show. And we clearly know that what he's doing is wrong. But there are people, and some of them who will like this show, who don't recognize that the president of the United States is doing the same evil shit. So it's just surreal. It really is. But they can't say, oh, they're doing this on the show because they're trying to call out Trump. No, they started it before Trump was president the second time and before he started doing this stuff. It's just where the story happens to be going and where they planned the story to go prior to his becoming president a second time. It just so happens that he's behaving in the same way as a vicious killer criminal elected official in real life. You can't make this stuff up. You know, you couldn't have predicted that this is where we would be with the TV show accidentally mirroring real life. I mean, obviously you can predict that some shows are going to get political and take a page from real life to construct their narrative, but this is not that. It's just so bizarre, and it's going to be crazy to watch it unfold. But anyway, I think the show is off to a good start this season, and I'm looking forward to, next week. And I will, of course, be back to do a breakdown and review of that episode once it's released. For now, I'm going to get out of here. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.